Good afternoon. It is such a joy to be here with you today and to be part of this panel. Today we have 4 incredible speakers on our panel, and they will be setting the stage and letting you know what we need to be focused on for the future of America after Dobbs. First on our panel is Josh Hammer. Josh is the opinion editor of Newsweek, a research fellow with the Edmund Burke Foundation, counsel and policy advisor for the Internet Accountability Project, a syndicate columnist through Creators, and a contributing editor for Anchoring Truths. Josh is a constitutional attorney by training and the co-host of 2 podcasts, Newsweek's The Debate and the Edmund Burke Foundation's NatCon Squad. Josh has been published by, well, just about everyone who's worth reading. And he's also a legal scholar who has been published by the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy and the University of St. Thomas Law Journal. He's a campus speaker through Young America's Foundation and a law school campus speaker through the Federalist Project. Josh previously worked at a large law firm and clerked for a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals. We welcome Josh Hammer. Also on our panel today will be Kurt Kondrich. Kurt is from Pennsylvania, my home state, the father of Chloe and Nolan and husband of Margie. Kurt served 20 years as a police officer before becoming a full-time advocate for the most vulnerable among us. Kurt has spoken twice before the UN on the genocide against babies with Down syndrome. Along with his family, he has received numerous awards, including the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation Leadership Award, the Diocese of Pittsburgh St. Anthony Award, the Array of Hope John Paul II Threshold of Hope Award, and many others. Kurt championed Pennsylvania's Chloe Law and Bill 321, which would have outlawed abortion on the basis of a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome in the womb. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed by Governor Tom Wolf. Kurt's favorite Bible verse is Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. We welcome Kurt. Joining Kurt is his daughter, Chloe Kondrich, and she is going to be the star of our show today. Chloe is 18 years old, also from Pennsylvania, daughter of Kurt and Margie. Chloe learned to read at age 3 with the help of her brother Nolan, and it has only gone up from there. She has met with numerous state and federal legislators, lobbying for several pieces of legislation aiding those inside the womb and those outside the womb. Chloe spoke at the UN in 2017 and again in 2018. She appeared with President Trump in the Rose Garden, and Chloe's picture with Vice President Pence hung in the West Wing. When she's not advocating for life, Chloe enjoys basketball, golf, volleyball, and baseball. Welcome, Chloe. And finally on our panel, we have Alison Centofante, who is a child advocacy innovator, in-demand public speaker, activist, and writer with over 10 years of experience speaking on abortion, marriage, human dignity, and religious freedom. Alison has been featured on Fox News, ABC, NPR, the Christian Broadcasting Network, and other national and international media outlets. Most recently, Alison served as the Director of External Affairs at Live Action, a nonprofit organization with the largest digital footprint in the global pro-life movement. Prior to that, Alison served as the Director of Alliance Relations at Alliance Defending Freedom. where she worked to protect religious freedom, free speech, marriage, family, parental rights, and the sanctity of life. Alison has been named to Red Alert Politics 30 Under 30, Christianity Today's 33 Under 33. We welcome Alison Centofante. So we'd like to have today, it's just a conversation with these experts in the legal field, the lobbying world, and the culture of the pro-life culture of America. We'd like to have a conversation about the future of life in America. So to start us off, Josh, where are we right now? What did Roe do, and how could that change in the future?
So thank you so much for having me, to you and obviously to Family Research Council. It's just such a fabulous organization. I'm so happy to be here. So, look, this is a very well-informed audience. I don't think I need to spend too much time on telling y'all what Roe versus Wade did. Roe is obviously the 1973 decision. The court, by a 7-2 count, established the so-called constitutional right for a woman to procure an abortion. I don't need to tell you guys, this right is nowhere to be found in the text, structure, or history of the 14th Amendment. It is contrary to every sound principle of constitutional interpretation and basic moral reasoning under the sun. From my perspective, it is the worst constitutional decision since the Dred Scott decision of 1857. 19 years after Roe versus Wade in 1992, the court, for the first time, had a direct chance to overturn Roe in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case. And at the time, most legal observers and court watchers actually thought that Roe would be overturned. Republicans had, at the time, a 6-3 majority of justices from their party on the court, and one of the Democratic nominees, Byron White, was actually one of the two dissenters in Roe versus Wade. Again, you're a well-informed audience. Don't need to spend too much more time on this. We know how that ended by a 5-4 court. The thrust of the constitutional right holding from Roe was upheld. The court in Casey basically said that we maintain the essence of the Roe holding. They slightly reformulated it. The actual holding of Casey is that a state cannot have a, quote, undue burden on a woman's, quote unquote, right to have an abortion up until, quote unquote, fetal viability. I'm using a lot of scare quotes here because these are not really real concepts, obviously. The court next had an opportunity to significantly pare back Casey in a 2016 case called Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. They did not do so. They reaffirmed yet again Roe and Casey, the undue burden standard. But we will now fast forward, and I'll stop here because I think we're going to get to it a little later. But obviously, this term is the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health case, where Roe and Casey are yet again directly in the court's crosshairs. So it's a very exciting time. We have another shot this term to take our stab at Roe and Casey. And I think we'll get to that a little later, so I'll cut myself off there.
Great. So as Josh said, Roe created this environment where abortion through 9 months of pregnancy is the law of the land in the United States. Alison, can you talk to us a little bit about the culture that this created in America?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I just want to first advocate for maybe Josh to be on Supreme Court one day. Can I get a round of applause for that? It would be really nice to have a good pro-life constitutional attorney on the court. I just actually flew in and I landed at IAD, and there's a woman on the train with me, and she was 8 months pregnant. She's a beautiful black woman, incredibly pregnant. I don't actually know how she flew, but I just looked at her on my way here and I'm thinking, she could absolutely abort that child if she wanted to. That's what Roe did. Roe created a society where if a woman at 8 months says, nope, I changed my mind, that she could kill that child, even though there are over 100,000 families waiting to adopt an infant. I like to point that out. There's over 100,000 families ready to adopt an infant that can't because of the supply and demand issue that abortion has created. That's something huge we should talk about. Roe has led to over 60 million children being killed in utero. That number is almost too big for us to comprehend. Attached to that baby is a mom and a dad that lost their chance at motherhood and fatherhood. And in a room of this size, and those watching online, I want to advocate and remind us all that some of us are post-abortive, men included, and that there's healing and that there's forgiveness. And we need you to be a part of this fight. We need you to tell your story. We don't want you hiding in the shadows or ashamed. I meet a lot of post-abortive women in the work I do, and they feel like, the left says there's nothing there for you to mourn. And they know that's not true. But the right can come off and say, you murdered your child, and they don't feel safe to share that with us. So we need to be a place of love and of forgiveness and healing, because our culture right now is not. Abortion has created, we say this term all the time, a culture of death. But it's a laissez-faire view of human dignity. We are so concerned about human rights, tolerance, inclusivity, but we don't apply that to the preborn child. We don't apply those same concerns for their life, their potential in this world. And that's why I'm so glad Kurt and Chloe are here today, because it's always shocking to tell people. They don't realize, but in the United States today, you can abort your child for their race, their sex, their disability. Those are all legal. You can absolutely abort your child and just say, I didn't want a girl, or it's a black child, or the baby has Down syndrome. And so we need to work big time, no matter what happens in Dobbs, to get these pro-life bills passed and persuade our family and friends to support them too.
Thank you so much for that, Alison. And as you mentioned, we do have this focus in America today on tolerance and acceptance and inclusivity. Kurt, you have been an advocate for the past 18 years for actual tolerance, actual inclusivity, and an actual celebration of people. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing.
Sure, thank you. I want to thank Family Research Council again for inviting us to come today and to share our story. They do amazing work, and please support the work that they do, because they are a loud voice. They're light in the darkness for the culture we live in. I want to thank you all for coming out today, and thank my beautiful daughter, Chloe, for making this trip with me. So when my wife was pregnant with Chloe at the time, we were 40 years old. We actually didn't think we'd have another child, but God had other plans. But during the pregnancy, I was a city police officer, and every time we went for an appointment, they kept offering us prenatal testing. And we were told at the time we were high risk. Everybody knows that's not a pleasant word. We were at risk to have a child with Down syndrome. And as a police officer, I just, I have an inquiry mind. I said, well, okay, so what does that mean? They go, well, you can get the prenatal test. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, you can find out if you're having a child with Down syndrome. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? I said, well, then you can decide whether you want to keep your child or not. So here I am, a city police officer. I'm in the hospital in the city of Pittsburgh, and I have medical professionals telling me that, and if anybody walks in that hospital with a weapon or whatever, I'm going to defend people. But I have people telling me, hey, listen, if you don't like to make up your child, you can terminate your child right here and get rid of them and, whatever. So we did not have prenatal testing. My beautiful wife, Margie, gave birth to Chloe, and May 16th, 2003, we had a postnatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. And as was said earlier, this prenatal, it's a genocide, make no marks about it. When people identify, target, and terminate a human being because they don't meet the cultural mandate, misguided cultural mandate for perfection, it's the ultimate extreme form of intolerance, prejudice, bigotry, it's hate. It's actually capital punishment without even a jury. People are so big about making sure that we don't execute somebody who's not guilty. Well, this is the ultimate execution of people who are innocent. And when Chloe was born, I learned about this. Like I said, I was a bee cop. That's what it was. I did like donuts. I will share with you. So I want to break down that myth. We do like donuts, please. But when she was born, I dialogued with parents. I kept hearing everybody saying that when they got the prenatal test, everybody I spoke to, and I speak all over the country, and we speak all over the world, they told me that the moment they got the diagnosis of Down syndrome, they were told, practically handed a slip, okay, go take care of this, basically. And that appalled me. So like I said, I had 20 years serving as a police officer. I remember telling my wife, I got to stop this. And I remember she saying, what are you going to do about it? I said, I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I can't sit back while they're doing this. Just as was mentioned, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is evil. Not to act is to act, not to speak is to speak. So Chloe and I just began speaking out. We began going to our state capitol and educating people on the abilities of people with Down syndrome. You know, my daughter is not disabled. If I want to see somebody who's disabled and really messed up, I just go to the mirror, to be honest with you, because that's where I'll see the most disabled person. My daughter is not. She doesn't have malice. She doesn't have evil. She'll have a mansion in heaven. I'll clean the driveway. She brings into our culture the things that we need more than ever right now, which is love and purity and innocence and kindness. And she doesn't judge you based on anything, where you live, who you are, what your background is. She'll love you because you're a human being. And I really believe that's why the devil uses the instrument of abortion to wipe out children like my daughter. And when we started our advocacy, I thought, well, as genetic testing rapidly advances, you know, we keep hearing that depression is genetic. Well, they get rid of me then. How about autism? How about baldness? How about being short? How about all these things? You know, let's just wipe everybody out that doesn't meet the cultural mandate. So it's a very slippery slope. So we began advocating, we began speaking, and I always say that our mission, you know, we're the instrument, God is the master craftsman. He just began using us. He kept opening doors. That's why we're here today, to get this message out about this prenatal genocide and about how it has to be stopped. And, you know, we were blessed in Pennsylvania. We were able to get a law called the Prenatal Down Syndrome Education Act that Chloe met with everybody, Republican, Democrat, because this isn't a political issue. When people say, well, there's no politics, this is not Republican, this is not Democrat, this is not conservative, this is not liberal, this is human beings. If you can't look at my daughter, that's why I take her everywhere with me, and meet my daughter. I hope you can meet her after we're done talking here, and see the goodness she brings to this world, and you're clearly blind. This is a human issue. This is an issue about we as people surviving. So we did our advocacy in Pennsylvania in 2014. They passed this law within 6 months of us beginning to advocate for it. So if anybody knows about Pennsylvania, you can't get a law passed in 10 years to change a stop sign. But we got the Down Syndrome Act passed in Pennsylvania. They dubbed it Chloe's Law, and she signed it on the governor's desk next to Governor Corbett, and her name was forever on that law. And that makes sure that when a woman gets a diagnosis, instead of just being told to abort, she's given factual supportive information. And as was said, we want to make abortion illegal for Down syndrome. That's what we work for. We speak all over the world, the country, United Nations. And Chloe was invited to the White House and President Trump there. What did President Trump do to you when you were at the White House for the Right for Life? What did he do?
Kiss me in the head.
He kissed you on the head. So, and put her picture up. And when you tell people what Jesus, when you were made in the womb, and I tell Chloe how we talked to her, and her brother talked to her in the womb. He was 4 at the time. What did Jesus do? What did he make you?
Made me perfect.
Jesus made her perfect. That's what I always tell people. People with Down syndrome have an extra chromosome. I wrote an article once. I said Adam and Eve had Down syndrome until the devil stole the extra chromosome. Because she's a visual of how we were supposed to be on this earth, and we're a visual of what we've morphed into, which hasn't been very pleasant. So I'll continue to share the stuff we've done as we go around. Like, again, I just want to thank this awesome panel and for allowing us. You know, our most precious, sacred, priceless national treasure is not oil, it's not gold, it's human life. And if we do not defend and protect... As was said earlier, my favorite Bible verse is Proverbs 31:8, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. And I will share with you, if you want to see after, I do have that tattooed on my arm because it has to remind me every day when I get up that that's the reason God placed me on this earth. So I thank you again, and we'll just continue our conversation.
So as Kurt mentioned, he and Chloe go around the world and advocate for unborn babies with Downs in the womb and unborn babies in general in the womb. But the abortion of people with Downs, specifically because they have Downs, is allowed under Roe right now in America, as Alison mentioned. And as Josh alluded to at the beginning, we do have a chance to change that. We have the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Supreme Court case that is coming up. It'll be heard December 1st. And this case will challenge whether or not all bans on abortion prior to viability are unconstitutional. Josh, can you tell us a little bit more about what that case could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, though, I want to just briefly talk about the Down syndrome situation in this country, which is just beyond horrific, obviously. So I'm Jewish, and this is somewhat personal to me, actually, because this is just straight up eugenics. It is literally just eugenics. Obviously, a lot of us are familiar with kind of the early writings of Margaret Sanger, who, of course, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who, of course, was a vitriolic racist and was a proponent of race-based eugenics, which is kind of a lot of kind of the overarching purpose of kind of early advocacy for abortion and, to an extent, advocacy for birth control as well. And it was a lot of these kind of early stage 1920s era eugenicist writings that the early Nazis in the 1920s and early 1930s really kind of latched onto. In fact, really, the Nazi Party in the 1930s, before they kind of started building the death camps and all of that, they started with eugenicist-style experimentation on what the Nazis would call, I'm not going to try to pronounce the German, life unworthy of life. So we currently today are dealing with the remnants of this horrific legacy. There are countries like Iceland that are effectively trying to just eliminate Down syndrome. So just God bless you in what you're doing, because it really is just so important. But let's get back to the Dobbs case. So Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health is a case out of the state of Mississippi. It's out of Jackson, Mississippi. It comes out of the court that I previously clerked on. I clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which has appellate jurisdiction over Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. The judge that I clerked for, actually Judge James C. Ho, I should probably say to be a little more formal, was actually on the panel. He said that he was forced to concur because of binding Supreme Court precedent, but he said very clearly, in no uncertain terms, that there is no constitutional right to abortion, that all of this is totally wrong here. So the Dobbs case in Mississippi pertains to a Mississippi state statute that effectively bans abortions at 15 weeks gestational period. There are some limited dispensations, some limited exceptions for extreme life and health of the mother situations, but it's basically, for all intents and purposes, a straight-up 15-week abortion ban. And the question presented to the Supreme Court in this litigation, the QP and kind of legalese and lawyer speak, is whether all pre-viability prohibitions on abortion are unconstitutional. Now, that is basically a direct challenge to Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which, as I was saying earlier, is the 1992 case that held that for pre-viability abortions, a state cannot implement a, quote, undue burden on the woman's purported right to procure an abortion. So it's very difficult to view the Jackson versus Women's Health case as anything other than a direct challenge to Casey and by extension, Roe. Now, facially, it's very exciting, obviously. We have a 6-3 Republican-nominated majority. You know, we could go justice by justice. Obviously, Chief Justice Roberts, not exactly the strongest conservative, to put it mildly here. I basically see 4 possible ways for the court to go in the Dobbs case. The first case, which is by far the worst case scenario, and I do not predict this will happen, is if they simply affirm the Fifth Circuit and the Mississippi statute is overturned. I don't think that's going to happen. For starters, it takes 4 votes to grant a writ of certiorari and hear a case in the first place. So if there's 4 votes to hear the case, the odds are, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to hear the case, only to affirm it. We just kind of had the whole Women's versus Hellerstedt case in 2016. They've already affirmed this. So if they're going to hear another case, it makes sense that they would do something other than just affirm the status quo. So that's the worst case scenario. One thing that they could do, and this is intellectually disingenuous to the extreme, but the court is nothing if not intellectually disingenuous when it comes to abortion jurisprudence here. They could purport to affirm the undue burden standard of Casey and simply say that the state of embryology and prenatal science has advanced in the past 30 years such that a 15-week abortion ban does not constitute an undue burden standard. So they could try to kind of have it both ways. I could see a world in which a Brett Kavanaugh might try to go there, kind of some of the swing justices. The other 2 options are the best possible option, of course, which is just straight up overturn Roe and Casey, gut all of this garbage, and return this issue to the states where it belongs. Ideally, of course, be constitutionally protected under the 14th Amendment, but at least kick it back to the states. And then the other thing they could do, which is also intellectually dishonest probably, but again, they could do it, is they could modify the Casey undue burden standard and basically concoct a new middle ground standard that affirms Roe's constitutional right, but fabricates some new standard, and it would just be a fabrication. This is nowhere in the constitutional text. We're in no man's uncharted waters at this point. They could just fabricate a new standard that would say the 15-week ban is constitutional for Mississippi to do, but maintains the core of Roe. So those are basically the 4 options, I think.
So we do have those 4 options, and we're hoping and we're praying, and it is really important to emphasize, we do need to be praying every single day for our Supreme Court justices, for their courage, for their adherence to intellectual honesty, and for their safety. We need to be praying for our Supreme Court justices to stand up for life in the womb and to stand up for our Constitution. Along those lines, our culture has brought us to this point. There have been shifts since 1973. We're not in the same place that we were. In 1973, babies who were just born, newborn babies, I have a 12-week-old little boy. 12-week-old little boys would have been operated on without anesthesia in 1973 because our medical science hadn't advanced to the point where we recognized that newborn babies could feel pain. Today, we have advanced so far that we recognize that babies in the womb can feel pain. And so when we're operating on a child in the womb, we're using anesthesia or we're using pain medication for that child, a separate pain medication from what its mother gets. Our medical field recognizes that those are 2 separate people and that they deserve separate care as separate patients. This is one of the advances that I believe has brought us to this point where we see a Supreme Court challenge to Roe. Alison, can you talk about some of the other cultural changes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first question you asked me was, where are we at as a culture? And I was thinking as I'm sitting here, well, we just saw the Women's March, right? You guys saw how angry and terrible that was, the way people were treating each other, pro-aborts treating pro-lifers. And I just think, as a young woman, it is so sad for me to see women so angry and so hurting. But it's because, and I've thought about this a lot, we can wake up and fight for life. But how do you wake up and fight for abortion? If you've ever seen an abortion procedure, and I encourage you to do it if you haven't, abortionprocedures.com is a medically animated one. It's not bloody or gory, but it'll show you from an abortionist what happens. If you see that, how do you wake up and fight for it? And a mentor of mine who had served in this movement for decades, and many of you here have too, so thank you. We stand on your shoulders, thank you. You fought in 1974. I thank you for that. She said, it's because the left has sold this lie to women that the only way to be successful is to be pitted against your child and to have the equal opportunity to be free of a child in the same way if a man has carefree casual sex, we should have carefree casual sex. And so therefore women are angry at the very thought of being, abortion being removed. And so you have young women my age, you have Billie Eilish, and all of these amazing people that have mega platforms that instead of saying, I am woman, hear me roar, I can do it all, support me and my family, and I can have children, you can't, that's where we could be if the women's movement didn't adopt this pro-abortion rhetoric way back in the Mayflower Hotel decades ago, because that was a fight, by the way. And I want to come back to that. But it wasn't always like this. The women's rights movement didn't always have abortion in their platform. There was a big fight at the Mayflower Hotel, and Sue Ellen Browder writes about this in her book Subverted, which I can't encourage you enough to get. But a lot of Christian women walked out and said, I will not be a part of this if you adopt abortion. And ultimately, abortion was taken in. And I always like to think, I want you to think, what kind of society would we live in today if that meeting went differently? Would Mary, with her 12-week-old child, be completely surrounded by support at work, at home, at church? Me with a 1.5-year-old, Chloe and all of her friends? Our society would look different because women would have demanded true equality. Not that we're asked to kill our children in order to play in this game of the economy in our society. That's why women are angry. On the left, I will pivot and say, you're seeing a new generation of pro-lifers, and I'm so proud of them. High school students, college students. We, in the movement, have younger than high school asking to work for us, and we're like, we can't employ you, you're not old enough yet. They have seen 4D technology. They have seen their siblings. They are more well-connected than ever. They know what an abortion does to a child. They've heard the stories of post-abortive men and women that have been brave enough to share those stories. They know Now, thanks to the work of so many groups, FRC, publications like Newsweek, advocates, activists, you guys, viability is an ever-changing line. That's something that Attorney General Lynn Fitch did an amazing job in her amicus brief to the Supreme Court. If you guys want to take a look, it's actually a really easy read for an amicus brief. Lynn Fitch, you guys should pray for her. She is a wonderful warrior woman, and she held nothing back in her appeal to the court. She called Roe and Casey, was it egregiously wrong? Egregiously wrong. And she said this line of viability in 1973 was closer to 24 weeks. Now we know that babies can survive at 20, 21 weeks. You know, we pray for them and our fingers are crossed and we give them all the help that they need. But if that's going to be your standard, well, that's changing and now we have to reconsider. And so we're proud of what Mississippi's doing. And I'm incredibly proud of the fact that whatever happens in Dobbs, and we're going to fight and pray for these justices to go the right way. If you're a praying person in this room, I want you to dedicate this next couple of months to praying for our justices. There will be an all-out assault for them over the next couple of months from a very well-funded left. They know what's at stake here. This will be an attack on their livelihood as a pro-abortion movement, which, you guys, it's a well-funded movement because guess who makes money in this fight for life? Abortionists see a woman walk in that's pregnant and they see an opportunity to make money. Abortions can cost upwards of $10,000. They make money off of this. They get government grants. We didn't even talk about that, but Planned Parenthood is well funded by our taxpayer dollars. So if you sit here today, I want you to pray for our justices that they would be convicted, that they would read the right things, that they would stand strong. We think we know how they might go on this, but it's all speculation. Anything could happen. And this is a moment in history that they could really change the tides. But no matter what happens at the court, we as activists, we as pro-life individuals, we have to make sure that we're doing everything in our personal lives so that if people are pregnant in an unplanned pregnancy, they can come to us, they know it's safe. One quick thing I will encourage you to do is every once in a while, just post on social media. If you find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, I want you to know it's safe to talk to me. I can't tell you how many times I've encouraged young people to put that out and girlfriends reach out in the next year and say, hey, I remember that still, can we talk? Stuff like that. Get involved in your local community. I mean, if Dobbs has Roe v. Wade overturned and it goes back to the states, I know you guys are spread out and from all over. Your local legislators should know your name. They should know what your priority is. They represent you. So I want you to just be encouraged. I know we've all been in this fight for a long time. It's like, does a phone call really matter? It does. These offices will judge one phone call and count it as either 100 or 1,000 based off of the demographic of your area. So each call does matter. It represents sometimes thousands of people. That's how they kind of rate it internally. And continue to support local pregnancy resource centers, support pro-life organizations. We're already funding the abortion industry, guys, with our taxpayer dollars. We need to do everything we can to make sure that our feet are on the ground and our finances are where our priorities lie.
I love that call to action, Alison. And I know that you talked about how could you possibly wake up each day and fight for abortion. You know, and I think there must just be such deep pain there, pain that needs to meet the healing touch of Christ. And we can be that person who reaches out and invites others in to recognize God's mercy and his love that is there for everyone, including those women and men who are post-abortive. I think the flip side of that is we have to be the party of joy. And you said, you know, legislators need to know your name. Well, one name that the legislators in Pennsylvania know is Chloe's, right? And all of those legislators know Chloe's name, and they know that she brings joy when she walks into the room. Chloe, do you think that these people need to be afraid to talk to legislators? Is it scary? No. Can you say that a little louder for them?
Nope.
No. No. Do you think that they could all make a phone call to their legislator and tell them to protect the unborn in the womb?
Yes.
So you heard it from Chloe. If they know Chloe's name, they've got to know yours too.
And I do, when we were advocating for Chloe's law in Pennsylvania, we met with every Republican, every Democrat, senator, and member of the House, and very diverse. If you know Pennsylvania, it's just like Virginia. It's a very diverse state. And I swear it was almost like the Christmas story. She was the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. And even one of the legislators who normally doesn't vote on things like Chloe's law said, you really haunted me by bringing her in here and showing me her, having to see her face as opposed to just seeing statistics. And statistics are very powerful, but there's nothing more powerful than seeing the actual face of a human being. When we spoke at the United Nations the 2 years in 17 and 18, it was because Iceland came out and proudly proclaimed that they had cured Down syndrome. I don't know if you heard that. You know how they cured Down syndrome? They got rid of every single person who was diagnosed prenatally with Down syndrome. So these are issues. These are real issues. And, when we woke up this morning, the first thing Chloe wanted to know was, where are we at today? What's the name of this place? What's this called?
Pray, vote, and stand.
She said, Dad, we going to pray, vote, and stand. Now, I want you to remember those words when you leave this summit, because that's what we have to do. We have to pray. We have to vote, but we have to stand. We have to be visible. We have to be a force out there. The old saying, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Chloe and I are the least qualified to be here in the States today. Like I said, I was a B Cop. I don't have any spectacular educational background. I wasn't raised in wealth or anything. I just devoted my life to being a police officer because I wanted to defend and protect people. And when you see an injustice happening out there, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we are called to act. We are called to go into action. David went into action. Jonah went into action. Moses went into action. We're no different. We are called to be people of action, people of faith. And if we were sitting here in Leesburg, Virginia, and it was 1850, and we weren't discussing the issue of slavery and how horrible it is and how we're going to stop it as the church, as Christians, then we are basically the lukewarm church that was described in the book of Revelations. If we were sitting here in, the 1940s and it was Germany and we were talking about the Holocaust and the trains going through town with people on them, then we're the lukewarm church that God basically vomits because they're not a church of action. Well, we're sitting here, it's 2021, and that's interesting because 21 represents the triplication of the 21st chromosome for Down syndrome. And the issue today that we're sitting here about is abortion. And here's something I picked up when Chloe and I spoke at the National Right to Life Conference in Charleston. I like statistics. I was a dragnet kid growing up, just the facts, ma'am. This is the abortion worldwide report for the past century. 100 nations, 1 billion babies. This is the report. This is the crime report. This is the death report. And if this isn't something to call action, to be praying about, to be voting about, and to be standing about, then I don't know what is. And I believe that all of us will be held accountable since God placed us in this moment of time for this reason. We're here. We're not here by chance. We're here because God's choice. He chose to put us here. And it's our duty as followers of Jesus Christ to get out there and to be a loud voice and to speak loudly about things that are happening and are going on. And the other thing, sometimes I flip around a little bit. That's just from working night shift for 10 years. But, when I talk about 1973, what's really interesting, if you go down to Virginia Beach and there's a bunch of sea turtle eggs in a nest, and you go down there and destroy them, I can guarantee you're going to probably be locked up, face severe penalties, and end up taken away. In Pittsburgh, we have some eagle nests. If you go down there and you break one of those eggs or disturb it or break the nest, I can guarantee you, because there's cameras on it, you'll be arrested and taken away to jail. What is an egg? It's because these animals are endangered. Well, my daughter's endangered. She's an endangered species. And what is an egg? An egg is a prenatal animal. So if you go out and destroy a prenatal animal that's endangered, like I said, you're going to get a knock at your door from law enforcement officials. Well, my daughter, I love animals, don't get me wrong, but I love people more. And individuals like my Chloe, like I said, there are countries that have wiped them out. You won't find any people with Down syndrome. And if that doesn't disturb you and if that doesn't make you think about advocating and speaking out, then I don't really know what else will. And like I said, I hope you can meet my Chloe after this. And this is the book she gives out to everybody. It's called Brilliant Souls. It's about people with Down syndrome and all the good they have. And I'd be glad to get you a copy if you'd like a copy of it, because we are living in a moment of history. If Mary and Alison's young children have a future, it's going to be because of what we do today. and I want them to have a bright future. But we have to act. We have to stand. We have to vote. And we have to speak up, because if we don't, then we're going to look back and we're going to really regret this moment of history that we didn't do anything for it. So, just once again, just encourage you to be mouths and voices of truth, of light, and of reason in this world.
So if this election taught us anything, it's that your vote matters, and like you said, we've got to stand up. We have to do something. We said that the best case scenario out of the Supreme Court with Dobbs is that abortion goes back to the states, basically. Is there anything else we can do? I don't think we can just stand idly by while California allows abortion through 9 months of pregnancy. Is there anything else at the federal level we can do to be a nation that actually protects the unborn children as much as we protect, the endangered animals?
So the first thing is I just want to endorse what has already been said here, which is everyone who is a person of faith needs to pray. Literally as much as you can between now and next June when the Dobbs case will come down. If you believe in prayer, if you believe in that power, then there is no excuse for not doing so. There's really not. So I just completely endorse what has been said on that front. As far as what we can do, I do not predict the worst. I do not predict that the court is simply going to overturn the Mississippi statute. I think that we'll have something in the correct direction. But for the sake of argument, let's operate under the presumption that the worst case is going to happen. Let's say that the Mississippi statute is overturned, that Roe and Casey are just completely the law of the land. So what can we actually advocate for from kind of a policy and legal perspective? So there's a few things, right? One is there's been a resurgence of thought in some legal conservative schools of thought. I've been part of this. I'm actually going back to my law school alma mater, University of Chicago Law School, in about 2 weeks to debate this very topic, is whether the 14th Amendment properly construed does actually simply leave abortion to the states, or whether the actual language of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment actually bans abortion. Straight up. The basic argument is that unborn children were persons recognized under the English common law. 1868 was when the 14th Amendment was ratified, so a state cannot discriminate between born and unborn persons. That would be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. I'm debating this very proposition at my law school alma mater in 2 weeks. Wish me luck. But some of us are now kind of pushing this. I think it's right, legally speaking, but as a pure tactical matter, it's also kind of a good thing to kind of push that argument, because then the kind of standard leave it to the state's position looks kind of moderate, fairly milquetoast actually by comparison. So I would encourage you to kind of read up on that argument. There's a fabulous 2017 article that a dear friend of mine named Josh Craddock wrote for the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, making the case for constitutional personhood. It's 30 pages. I mean, he's a lawyer, obviously, but it's just like the amicus brief from Attorney General Fitch. It's fairly easy to work your way through, so I would encourage you guys to read up on that. Beyond that, there are a few other things we can do. So again, constitutionally speaking, the 14th Amendment, we all talk about Section 1, that's the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause. Most litigation is there in Section 1. Section 5 of the 14th Amendment actually empowers Congress to enforce Sections 1 through 4 through legislative power. So translating that from legalese into reality, what that means is if you accept the argument that I said, that the Equal Protection Clause actually bans abortion, then under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, Congress has direct constitutionally given power to directly legislate on that nationally. Congress could literally pass a statute tomorrow. Senator Hawley, Senator Cruz, some other pro-life leader could draft this legislation tomorrow. Basically, it's drafting a bill and saying that we are going to invoke our Section 5 14th Amendment power and interpret the Equal Protection Clause as this and ban abortion nationwide. So, we're talking about lobbying legislators, kind of getting that argument out there. That argument, I think, should only continue to get out there more. And there's the final thing that I'll add here that we also could do, and this is another idea that my friend Josh Craddock, who I mentioned, has kind of been at the forefront of pushing. I think this is totally right. There's this misguided notion, and I've written so many words kind of arguing against this, that the Supreme Court is kind of the final authority binding law of the land, that it binds the presidency, it binds the Congress, it binds the states. Total nonsense. The Supreme Court is obviously the least dangerous branch, to borrow Alexander Hamilton's words from Federalist 78. Abraham Lincoln, from my perspective, the greatest president in United States history, of course, famously openly defied the Dred Scott decision. He issued passports to free blacks in Western territories in direct direct defiance of the Dred Scott decision here. Supreme Court opinions are only binding as to the parties to the lawsuit itself. So another thing that a pro-life president, obviously not the current one that we have, but a future pro-life president, President Trump could have done this if he, in theory, if he wanted to, but a future pro-life president could do this, could basically take executive unilateral action and again interpret the 14th Amendment along the lines that I have described and issue an executive order that would interpret persons as far as all federal rules and regulations are concerned to include unborn persons, and therefore under all kind of executive administrative state rules and regulations, unborn persons would be protected under the rule of law everywhere where born persons are protected. So those are kind of the tools at the federal level in like that worst case scenario that I would envision.
So we have the tools. We need to vote the right people into office, is what it sounds like. So if our other contestants, we're not on a game show. I wish we were. I'd give you all a free car. But if our other panelists here, our last thing for you, if you could give 30 seconds, what do you think everyone in this room, what is a concrete thing that everyone in this room can go do tonight to try to prepare the way for the unborn children who are in the womb right now, whose mothers may be contemplating abortion? What can we do to prepare a better place in America for those children?
Great question. I'll jump in here. I think right away, just realize that this is a fight, and we're not going to persuade everyone before we make abortion unthinkable and illegal in our nation. I think so many Christians that I encounter, we want everyone to agree with us, and then we'll all harmoniously come together around this. We can fight for that. We're going to try and persuade and educate. We know it changes hearts and minds, but just be ready to fight for the right thing. We didn't, to go back to what Josh was saying, we didn't wait to make slavery illegal until everyone thought it should be illegal, right? We didn't. And in fact, there was a crappy 3/5 compromise, which was no compromise at all, because a human being is a human being, right? So in the same way, I think of that with abortion law. We are compromising on 20 weeks pain capable. We are compromising on heartbeat or 15 weeks, right? Or at least just let us protect children with Down syndrome, okay? But our goal is to go get them all. Just like in the Bible, leave the 99, go back for the one. We want the 99, but we want them all. And so just be prepared to advocate. If you have questions, man, I really don't know how to answer a question about rape or this life of the mother exception. There's answers out there for you. I encourage you to check out Live Action's Pro-Life Replies, which is great little TED Talks. Josh Craddock is featured in there, who Josh just mentioned. There's so many ways for you to be more educated. I know there are things that I want to look up. I want to look up, when you said 1 billion babies, I'm like, all right, you know what? Someone's going to say that our planet couldn't handle 1 billion babies. So how do I respond to that? Be ready to have an answer for what you believe in. I already said, use your platform, your social media, your email list, your friends. Just be that place of love and acceptance, because you never know, guys, who in your arena may find themselves in unplanned pregnancy or know of someone who is. And lastly, I will say pray and act. Pray for the justices, pray for people's change of hearts. I often pray for our administration that they would have a Saul to Paul moment. Man, I want them to wake up and go, what are we doing? And stop a lot of the things that they're doing, but particularly on abortion, that they would understand that we all have unique human dignity. So that's what I'd say. Use your voice, pray, act, and I forget the last one, but that's you. Hopefully someone wrote it down.
This is prayer for the stand.
Pray vote stand.
That's all. And I'll make it real short. You know, our motto, Chloe and I, when we travel around, is embrace, don't erase Down syndrome. I encourage you to connect with us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and that, because we do a lot of things. We speak all over. We're speaking West Virginia on Saturday. So just spread the word. And I tell people all the time, you know, you can either follow the word or follow the world. It's a one-letter difference. The L will get you lost because it's all lies about life. So make sure you root yourself in the word. We read the word every day, because the word is where you're going to get your knowledge. It's where you're going to get your facts, and that's where you're going to get your courage. I've been in a lot of battles in life. This is the greatest mission God's ever placed me on, and I just hope you join us in this battle, because we will defeat the enemy. Thank you.
The only thing that I'll very briefly add here in our remaining seconds is I want to emphasize the vote in vote. All of this is kind of moot and academic unless everyone watching, unless all of our friends, our congregationists and everyone, unless we get out there and actually vote. The reality is that the current administration, it was literally just this week, if I'm not mistaken, that the administration returned Title X family planning funding to Planned Parenthood. That's purported Catholic Joe Biden, right? The House of Representatives recently just is trying to quote unquote legislatively codify Roe versus Wade. Which would again effectively put under our U.S. federal statutory law a woman's quote unquote right to choose up until effectively the 9th month of pregnancy. The current ruling regime is radically unhinged on this issue. The days of Clinton-era safe, legal, and rare are totally gone. That is anathema to the current leadership of the Democratic Party. And unless we get off our feet and get to the polls and vote to kick those bums out of office, all this is kind of moot and academic, I think.
Let's give a final round of applause for our panelists.